welcome to Alistair Nelson TV. I'm your usual host, Alistair Tyro Nelson. The idea of this television is to keep you informed and abreast on social and political issues and national transformational issues so as to help the youth to appreciate this country better as we go forward. There's a challenge to our development. There's a challenge to our transformation as a people. And we believe that we set ourselves a task going forward in Chapter 6 of the Directive Principles of State Policy of our Constitution that we have currently. And this is the time that we cannot put up an I don't care attitude and sit by and watch. As time rolls on, we need to go back to our Constitution and see the task that we set for ourselves. And we must be determined to make an impact in our generation so that the next or those behind us, so that the future people will not suffer living on this land. Like I said, you can get us on YouTube at Alistair Nelson Television, on TikTok at Alistair Nelson, on Facebook at Alistair Nelson. Today, this episode is about a country called Ghana, how we came about. We started as 4 colonial constructs. The Northern Territory, like I said, we started as 4 colonial constructs. The Northern Territories, the Transvaal Togoland, the coastal states, and then the Ashanti colony. These 4 colonial constructs had to come together in a unitary state to come to independence to form the country Ghana. It didn't come easily. It came with a fight, and it took young men like Kwame Nkrumah, among others, to initiate the fight to get Ghana's independence. How did we come about? At first, there were Gold Coast colonies, 2 Gold Coast parties that were there, and they had to come together under the auspices of the sponsorship of a timber merchant, Pa Grant, who was born in 1878 and died in 1956, and who came from the Western region, who put his money to the political effort at the time and combined those 2 Gold Coast conventions into the United Gold Coast Convention. Then political activity started, and they went ahead and invited Kwame Nkrumah, who had been seen in London organizing the West African Conference for people from West African origin by one of the people who was then member of the UGCC at the time, Akweje. So when Kwame Nkrumah arrived, they had already started political work. But with his intention and what he wanted to do, he decided to form youth associations across all the country. And he got support wherever he went and formed those youth associations. So those youth associations formed the bedrock for the United Gold Coast Conventions. Then what happened? With time, in 1948, there was a boycott of goods, which is essential commodities that Ghanaians needed, like milk, sardines, sugar. The prices were too high on the market, so Ghanaians decided to boycott. So that boycott in 1948 came to an end in February. But on the day the boycott came to an end, something mysterious happened. Soldiers that had gone to the World War 1939 to 1945, who were seeking better conditions for retirement, were on the march. On their way, they were shot by Colonel Emery, and 3 of them fell. It was that culminated an action that led eventually to the arrest of Kwame Nkrumah. This action was led by Ni Kwabena Boni, the Osuala Tamancha at the time, who decided to follow through after these 3 soldiers were shot. Many people in this country at the time didn't know who the leading political figures were, but the colonial masters decided to arrest the 6 leading and conspicuous political leaders at the time and keep them. So it was upon that arrest and upon their release that brought divisions within the United Gold Coast Convention. And they wanted to change Kwame Nkrumah's position as General Secretary to make him Treasurer. He consulted the youth groups that he had formed, and upon advice, they asked him to break away. So he broke away on 12 June 1949 with his young people, K. Egberema, his lieutenant, who had gone around the country with him, Kojo Botio, who was part of the group, Saki Sheikh, who was also part of him. All of them at the time were below 40 years. but they wanted to set out the country. They were birthing the nation at that young age of theirs. So they went round. And then in 1950, Kwame Nkrumah decided to launch the positive action. After formation of the CPP on 12 June 1949, he launched in January 1950 the positive action. The positive action led to his arrest, and subsequently he was jailed. He was jailed consecutively for 3 years and was to come out only in 1953. But K. Gbedema, seeing the popularity of the man who had been put in the James Fort prison, decided to call upon the colonial authorities to call for elections. So they went for elections in 1951, council elections. The CPP swept all the elections, swept all the seats. Then they had to go for legislative elections. It was there and then Nkrumah, who was not a pure Ga, but who was in the Jamestown prison here in Accra Central, decided to stand on the ticket of the CPP. Every evening, upon the organization of one popular woman whose edifice is on the 50 Pessoa coin, Dede Ashikinshan, has a name popularly is, who supported and rallied market women and put her money she had made in a flour business to support Nkrumah's efforts. Every evening, people will go and stand in the Usher Fort prison in Jamestown and sing and sing and sing till morning. When the elections came off in February 1951, Kwame Nkrumah, who was in prison, won a landslide against Jacob Bechebi Lante, Otanka Lante's father at the time. So upon winning the elections, he had to be released from prison. His release from prison led him to become leader of government business. In 1952, the first Gold Coast Black African cabinet was formed. Then again, he had not left. We had formed the government, but we're still under colonial rule. The governor was still around. The other ministries of foreign affairs, defense, and interior was not in the hands of the African. What did we do? We needed to move to get political independence and then go further to seek for our economic independence. This is what Kwame Nkrumah decided to do. So in 1954, there was elections again. Why did that elections come about? There had been an increment in the cocoa price on the world market. And Kwame Nkrumah, upon reading the CS and Ross report, because of inflation in the countryside, in the country, the colonial government set up the CS and Ross Commission to investigate what caused inflation in the countryside. And they noticed that they put more money in the hands of the cocoa farmer. And that is why inflation was caused in the countryside. So Kwame Nkrumah, upon reading that report, decided to take 71% of the increment on the world market and keep the money in the Bank of England. And other taxes that those marketing companies that were dealing in cocoa, he raised other 2 taxes upon them and kept the money in the Bank of England from 1954 to 1958, which accrued to about 198 million pounds at the time the money was released to us. So because Kwame Nkrumah took 71% of the money, there were agitations from cocoa farmers. And those who Kwame Nkrumah had broken away from and had beaten them at the elections in 1951 decided to regroup under this to fight him on the cocoa grounds. They came to the election and they lost miserably again. Then they would not understand themselves. Kwame Nkrumah had moved the motion of destiny. Remember in 1953, they didn't support him. They traveled to London to tell the Queen not to grant the independence. So what will happen? Kwame Nkrumah said that we could not go to independence as a federal state. We needed to come together. I told you were 4 colonial constructs. So these 4 colonial constructs, the Northern Territory, the Transvolta Togoland, the Coastal Estates, and the Ashanti Colony, had to come together to form the country Ghana. But how did we do it? Because the other side, which had lost the elections, were also asking for a federal system of government, that those colonial constructs should stay, and that each of them should have their government in their colonies. Then we had to go for an elections. So they called for the 1956 plebiscite in order to make this country one nation as it is today. It is not for nothing. There was a lot of fights. There was a lot of agitations. There was a lot of campaign. At the end of the day, the CPP came out victorious. And that is how we're able to put this country together, Ghana, to make it what it is as we sit today. We had to fight for it. It took young men, like I said, Kwame Nkrumah, barely 38 years when he came in, all the way from London to join the UGCC. You have K. Bedema, who was also less than 40. You have Kodobo Otiu, who was less than 40 at the time. You have other people who joined the movement who were less than 40 years. What was their interest? Why did these young men? Then subsequently, you also know and come to learn of Buzia, who also came in the Second Republic. A young man at the time. He was part of the legislative instrument of 1946. He was 33 years at the time. Many more people. You have Chairman J.J. Rawlings, who came into the political scene as a young person. When he came in on 15th May 1979, he was barely 33 years. You understand? Many more people have come into national politics in a very young age and have made an impact. And this is the time I want to challenge the youth of this country, not to sit on the fence as we have our democracy in the Fourth Republic. They must play a leading role to make sure we succeed with this democracy. We must not sit and watch and call ourselves young and be exuberant for nothing. We must put our energies, our knowledge that we have acquired from school, and then we must come with good intentions to live for others, to make this country a better place for all of us in future.